All right, so I'm gonna play Confrontation, and I'm gonna burn 4 ATM and win the game.
Bruh. You want to just play without him? Yeah.
Sule! The Mistborn deck building game is upon us, and it is a ton of fun. If you don't already know, this game marks an important moment for Sanderson fans, as this is the first fully Cosmere-inspired board game by Brotherwise Games. Some of you Sander fans may have played A Call to Adventure, the Stormlight edition. And while that game has some cute nods to the Stormlight archive, the core of that game existed before that release. Think of it like a themed Monopoly. We won't be touching on the game much in this video, but let us know if you want a review of that game too in the comments below. With the huge anticipation for the Cosmere RPG felt throughout our community, we thought it'd be a good idea to review the deck builder and share our thoughts on the game as a whole. We're going to talk about the lore connections and the gameplay experience, as well as some general thoughts we had on the game. Feel free to skip to the topics that interest you the most using the chapters below. Otherwise, let's start with those juicy story elements. Oh yeah, we'll also technically be spoiling Mistborn Era 1 all the way through Hero of Ages, so yeah, you've been warned. Like I said in the intro, this game is the first Cosmere-built game Brotherwise has released to the public. My first impression of the game was, wow, I am shocked as to how well the world and magic of Scadrial were able to be translated into a deck-building game. This game only includes lore elements from the Final Empire, and players will be assigned a random character card from a familiar cast of Mistborns. You could play as Kelsier, Vin, Sean Alariel, and Marsh? Yeah, so Marsh isn't technically a Mistborn, but with the limitations of Book 1, that's as close as Brotherwise could get to a 4th Mistborn, as Marsh does have the ability to burn all 8 metals by the end of Book 1. Yep, that's right, this game focuses on only 8 of the Allomantic metals. Well, technically 9, but we'll touch on that in a minute. The 8 metals are the ones revealed to us in the Final Empire, that being the physical and the mental metals. The 2 groups of 4 metals are paired off into subgroups of internal and external, and are linked mechanically. This leaves us with the expected pairs of pushing and pulling metals: pewter and tin, steel and iron, copper and bronze, zinc and brass. Each of the 4 character cards focuses on one of the 8 metals as their specialty. Vin with pewter, as she often used pewter to fuel her in fights against much larger foes. Kelsier with steel, as he believes it's the most useful allomantic metal, along with its companion iron. Sean with zinc, as she was quite the emotional manipulator in the noble courts, but was less keen on the more physical metals since Vin was able to, you know. And Marsh has the easiest correlation, as bronze was his only natural allomantic ability. Within the game, each metal is associated with various cards that represent that metal and its effects in some way. Some steel cards would push other cards out of the game by eliminating them. Some iron cards could pull cards from your discard to the top of your deck. Pewter cards often hit your opponents hard or gave you strength back in the form of life points. Brass cards often eliminated cards from your own deck, soothing those emotions or cards away. Bronze and copper often interacted with cards in the market, so seeking and smoking out other players maybe? I don't know, they weren't all perfect, but there was definitely a lot of effort put into connecting the mechanics of the game to the metals. And of course, this wouldn't be an Era 1 game if we didn't mention ATM. Yes, ATM is in this game, and it takes the form of a special resource. Every Mistborn, and Marsh, is able to use ATM, but it's a scarce resource, which is very rare to come by. I like this part of the game, and it feels very on theme for Era 1. Unfortunately, the rest of the story connections for ATM fall apart pretty fast. One way to get access to ATM is to buy the rare and expensive ATM cards. You could buy the Ruin card, the Confrontation card, the Balance card, wait, what? And the Preserve card? Okay, now that's just wrong. Brandon has confirmed in the past that ATM's mechanics in Era 1 got a little wonky, and that the metal called ATM in the novel is actually an ATM Electrum alloy of some sort. But for any normal reader of the books, the idea of ATM, the literal body of Ruin, being used by the Preservation card feels off. Also, the ATM cards can be used to power any allomantic power and counted as every allomantic metal for various checks, which again feels a little fragile. I like the shards as cards and such, but I'm more nitpicking because it's fun. I hope I triggered somebody with this tangent. Some of the coolest connections between the metals and the cards were the allies, as each metal had an ally represented who was a basic allomancer of that metal. You could have a soother working the deck for you while your thug was out attacking and taking hits for you. It all felt really cool and on theme. Overall, the story connections to the game are good, but they often fell to the wayside as we played, and that's mostly because the game was just way too fun to be distracted by the Easter eggs. Yeah, the Mistborn deck builder is a super fun game. Zach and I have had the opportunity to play quite a few times, and overall we've had a wide variety of experiences with it. Of the 3 different routes to victory, we've seen 2 of them work pretty well, that being the quest track and dealing enough damage to eliminate your opponents. I personally attempted to win with the Confrontation card once, but I ended up winning on the quest track first by accident. We found that the quest track is the easiest path to victory, and by the time you hit late game, if you hit the late game, it's very possible to complete an entire quest start to finish in 1 turn. turn, causing a huge blowout victory for somebody. Damage can be a viable strategy, but if only one player is focusing on it, then they're definitely fighting an uphill battle. One of the more frustrating aspects of the game definitely has to be the target mechanic, which heavily restricts how players can do damage and where that damage goes. Essentially, you can only hit the player who held the target, and that player could choose to give it away if they were hit, but they didn't have to. And oftentimes you could be locked out of damaging a specific player altogether. The only time we'd seen a true damage victory came when each player had been dealing an even amount of damage across the table for the whole game. As far as strategy goes, I have a few tips. First off, be the first player. That's mostly a joke, but there does seem to be a large advantage to going first, at least in a 3-player setting. Brass and zinc seem to have the most powerful cards for progression, and the player using these metals was often the one winning. Copper and bronze take a close second, and all the physical metals seemed very hard to specialize in, as those players got little to no advancement opportunities. You see, specializing takes the form of focusing the cards you're buying on just a few metal types. You can easily be tempted by a big 6 damage pewter card, but if your primary focus is using zinc and brass cards to progress on quests, then damaging a player may actually take away from your ability to win. We found that zinc's ability to eliminate cards from your discard or your hand was super useful. Getting rid of your funding and training cards early and replacing them with more specialized metal cards led to consistently impressive turns. My general recommendation would be to run one primary metal pairing and have 1 to 2 other powerful cards from each other pairing, depending on your options in the market. The hardest point in any game we played was when the market dried up. We often found that the card market would fill up with a bunch of mid to low cost iron, steel, pewter, and tin cards. It made it hard to want to buy anything, as picking a mediocre steel card in the later game would not only clog your deck with a card you didn't really want, but also give the next player a potentially better option to choose from. This could be the result of some consistently unlucky shuffling, but it was an experience I found in almost every game I played. We found that after playing a few times, the second character ability helped with this problem a lot, as we would often resort to using it just to get cards out of the market. See, this ability allows any player who's reached that tier on their training to buy a card from the market, use its top effect, and then eliminate it from the game entirely. Spending 3 boxings for a little extra damage for one turn didn't feel great, but it was far better than wasting that money to clog up your discard pile. We ended up having a lot of turns where we would save up our money to try and cycle through the market by buying cheaper cards first and hopefully stumbling into something from our focused metals. This is a more viable strategy if your deck is built around collecting boxings, but it's nonetheless reliant on the luck of the market either way. As for the quest tracks, the specific quests drawn for each game seemed to greatly impact how that game played. The Creedic Shaw quest, for example, allowed a player to draw extra cards in a turn, and whoever hit the midpoint milestones first would draw 2 extra cards in a single turn. This was often devastating for the other players, as action economy does seemingly rule this game. On the flip side, the Crew Hideout quest provided health to players who reached its milestones and nothing more. It was a lot of health for sure, but this was the last quest anyone tried in each game it was out, as health didn't progress your character in any way other than extend your longevity. We had a lot of 3-player games with our friend Harrison from Tabletop Sandbox, check him out below. And usually 2 players would end up fighting over the most beneficial quest, while the 3rd player could run away with the 2nd best quest all on their own, so long as they were focusing on the quests. Remember, these quests won 80% of our games. All in all, each game we played was very different from the rest, and no one victory felt the same. Like most games, the strategies aren't all perfectly balanced, but the more we learned the game, the more even it felt. The Deckbuilder has found great praise online and is well deserved. We're happy to say that we'd be willing to play the game regardless of its Cosmere connections, because it really is that fun. Since this is the first Lightcaller review of any sort, I guess we should give it a rating. We here at Lightcaller say the Mistborn Deckbuilder has reached the 8th heightening. I truly hope all of you give it a chance as it hits store shelves later this year. We can't wait to see what Brotherwise has in store for us in the future. Kolo?